Hello, welcome back to Up the Villa. This is our opposition preview for Ipswich v Aston Villa. I'm delighted to be joined by Benjamin Bloom. How are you?
I'm good, man. You?
Yeah. Loving your content, apart from your latest upload about Birmingham City. So we're going to cleanse you and we're going to talk about the biggest club in Birmingham. So,
hey, who's going to score more points this season, though?
Hey, Champions League Villa. I'm sure.
And they've got 8 more games as well, Luke.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll toss up a lot, and it might crumble at some point for them as well. So, but yeah, so I want to know, how's the journey been as an Ipswich fan? Because it feels to me like you've been in the wilderness for a little bit, and now you are back in the Premier League again. So, how's the journey been?
That's accurate. Yeah, we're in the wilderness for a long time. Obviously, you watchers with long memories will remember the last time we were in the Premier League was only actually for 2 seasons, one incredible season. And then, as with many things in life and in football, a sharp rise is often followed by a you-know-what. For supporters with even longer memories, will remember Ipswich and Aston Villa going toe-to-toe for the league title and an incredible run through the 60s, 70s and 80s for Ipswich. But yeah, it's been a really horrible 20 years, frankly, supporting Ipswich. Wrong place, wrong time when ITV Digital went under. So imagine nowadays a team getting relegated from the Premier League, sorting out all their budgets, getting to about September, and then the TV company saying, right, your parachute payments, we're taking them away from you. So everyone just went into administration who got relegated that season. They never really recovered until new ownership in, oh God, Ipswich fans would kill me. I can't remember, like 2012, 11, or I can't remember exactly when. Might be before that, forgive me. But in comes the new owner, and you think all our Christmases have come at once, but bless him, his heart was in the right place. He had money, but he was a hapless owner. And then all of a sudden, the TV money went up in the Premier League, the parachute payments went up, and it became very hard to compete in the Championship. And stagnation in the end, down to League One, absentee owner. But then all our Christmases did come at once, because here came Game Changer a couple of years ago, and very quickly they brought in Kieran McKenna. And to your original question, I've waffled along about the wilderness, but the journey has just been amazing the last 2 years.
Yeah, I want to touch on Kieran McKenna. He's a young coach, and there's a lot of young coaches that are doing really good things, but he's got back-to-back promotions. So how good is he, and what really stands out for you watching his side and watching him on the touchline?
Well, the calmness and the kind of really sort of cerebral, I mean, you've got one at Villa, but these sort of professor-type football managers, that is great. And don't get me wrong, with the likes of Mick McCarthy and Paul Lambert for certain other clubs, Paul Cook as well, who we had recently, that all worked in the past. But it feels like the game is now this very studious type managers who professor is the best word that I can use. And to sum up the achievement, it's just bonkers. We get it in League One, Ipswich were a very big fish. I know you're just joking about Birmingham, but a very big fish with the biggest budget, and promotion is par. We get that. But to go straight through the Championship is bonkers in any year. But to go straight through in the year with the 3 most powerful parachute teams we've ever seen, look at the points totals. And look at the fact that now all the teams that finished above those 3, Leicester, Southampton and Leeds, all have been charged with P&S. So they were kind of relegated under pretty icky, sticky circumstances. Maybe Leicester aside after what's recently transpired there. But let's not, I've had enough Leicester fans having a go at me on YouTube for my opinions on that. But just an extraordinary managerial performances. And you tell me, Luke, when will we next see, maybe it'll be Birmingham, when will we next see a League One team go straight through back to back?
Yeah, well, I hope it's not. I hope it's not Birmingham. It looks like they are going to get promoted this year, but then hopefully let's just not go there. How worried were you in the summer, though? Because Chelsea was sort of like sniffing round him. How did that make you feel? Because you'd obviously got promoted, and you know it's massive to be on that journey with your manager. Like Villa, we're on a journey with our manager now, like achieving good things, and he's such a big part of why you are there. So how did it sort of make you feel? And did you ever think he was going to go?
Yes. And not to Chelsea. It was Brighton that was really, really close. Forgive me, I've forgotten the lad's name who manages Brighton. He's only 31, the German manager. I can't remember his name. The comments will tell us when this is up. But there was a week when basically Kieran McKenna had a very, very big decision to make. And the difficulty for clubs like Ipswich and even Villa to a certain extent with their championship run with Dr. Tony is that if you spend 3 years in the championship and someone like Brighton spends 5 years in the Premier League, regardless of however many European Cups you've won or league titles, they're light years ahead of you because of the chasm between Premier League. Obviously, historically, no one would say Brighton are ahead of Ipswich, but get in the now, Brighton is a far more attractive job for a football manager with what they've done and what they've got at their disposal right now. Unfortunately, whatever Bobby Robson or Alf Ramsey did, than Ipswich is. And I think there was a week where there was a very big decision had to be made. And pleasingly, and time will tell whether it was the right decision or the wrong decision. I happen to think that it was the right decision, not for me as an Ipswich fan, but for McKenna. I think whatever happens this season, I think he's a bit fireproof and bulletproof, and his reputation won't drop off. But Luke, mate, if he'd have not been in there, and I don't know what you could have done after an extraordinary managerial performance, you just would have imagined Ipswich would have just been guaranteed relegation if whoever had come in. It would have just been such a hard job.
Yeah, it's a little bit like when sort of like Forest got promoted, and you look at Leicester now with their, you know, Steve Cooper. Like it's not got that right feel, has it? And I think, and you know, I look at Ipswich and I look at sort of like what you were doing last year, all of those late goals that you were scoring, you know, that heart and that fight that you've got and that togetherness. We've even seen it against Southampton last week, that, you know, the last minute goal, and it's a big collective, isn't it? So how does it feel being back in the Premier League, and what are your sort of aspirations? Does it go further than just staying up, or is it just fully focused on Premier League survival?
There's so many different feelings. I mean, I suppose you probably felt a bit different with Villa because it's a very big club that had invariably is just in the Premier League all the time. So there's probably a sense with Villa of, well, okay, a few years in the Championship, but back to where historically the club is placed, you know. With Ipswich, there's far more of a sense of just, wow, this is incredible, because as much as people my age and people even older see Ipswich as a top-level club, there's kids supporting Ipswich now who are 21, never seen them in the Premier League. The height of anything has been like a League Cup run to the semi-final and losing in the playoffs to Norwich. That's been it for the last, you know, for their lifetimes watching. So it's great. It's a bit overwhelming. And it's a bit, and we'll talk about, you know, the expectations of the game against Villa, who are in the Champions League. I think something dawned on me as well in the transfer window. We had a great conversation on the Blue Monday podcast about, I was asking, where are the proven Premier League players that we're signing to keep? So we've got young players and all of this. And my podcast colleague Joe explained to me, it's kind of not possible anymore. And Villa had to just get over the line, you know, with a superstar England player in their team with 100 million quid release clause as well in the first season. And you can't just sign 4 35 million quid players on 100 grand a week. You're going to bust P&S, not to mention if you've been in League One and you've got 1 year of that on your 3-year rolling limit as well. So it's so exciting. It's so gratifying. It is overwhelming, but I think if you're a balanced football fan and you have this idea of credit in the bank, I can't complain with whatever they do this season. The last 2 years has been just beyond. But to answer the last question, Luke, some Ipswich fans will disagree with me, and that's their right. Give me one plus one goal difference with 18th place getting a points deduction, survival, and just get in there for another year, because you know that chasm, you're then on the right side of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's all about building blocks and foundations for me. And we saw it when we got back into the Premier League. Like we had to sign a lot of players because a lot of our players were on loan, and you start to bring in a caliber of player. And like you're saying, you start to realise that they're not sort of like £35 million sort of superstars. And then the next season, I think we brought in like Ollie Watkins, and you just start bringing in different players, and you start attracting different players, and you can start to grow. So like you, I think it's important that you do try and stay up this season. So I think one of the big things that I've spotted, and we kind of spoke about like McKenna, where, would he go if whatever. So we saw with Vincent Kompany coming up, and the one thing that I said last year is that he has to adapt to the Premier League. You can't just play the same way that you've played maybe in League One, in the Championship. You've got to somewhat adapt, because the Premier League will just eat you alive. And what I've seen from Ipswich in the last 3 games is a little bit of an adaptability. Your last 3 games, you've got 3 draws, and you turn 1 or 2 of those into a win, and you're starting to like get big results. So have you seen a little bit of a change, and what is sort of like the Ipswich style of play?
It's difficult because the comparison is Russ Martin at Southampton, who everyone thinks is going to be so stubborn on the ultra possession stuff. The good news is, if you followed Ipswich, he's already adapted So in League One, they went for the mega possession, sorted out the defence, and then it kind of dawned on McKenna that you need to be able to run and you need to be able to fight. And there's points in the game where you have to kick the ball out of your half and get up the pitch on a crappy pitch in League One in November away from home or whatever. He adapted a little bit in the Championship. Obviously, the numbers at the end of League One were ungodly, just massive possession, just huge control of every game. But, we were a dominant sized club at League One. In the Championship, he adapted a little bit, and, you got elements of maybe what we're seeing now at the end of the season, where they just had to win games. And you know how heavy the legs get when you're an underdog in a promotion race. I mean, for God's sake. But he's brought Premier League physicality into the club, with the likes of sort of Greaves and Delap, particularly. Having a centre forward who can run and run and run is a big unit is going to be really helpful. Obviously, there's going to be games where it's 30 to 35% possession, and in League One it was 65 to 70% possession. So we think there's going to be the adaptation to be able to counter-attack, and you'll probably see it on Sunday. Let's just be honest, Villa, in theory, unless they play really badly, are going to have more of the ball, aren't they? So there's going to have to be an element of counter-attack. We wonder whether we might see Free at the back at some point, although he's been, very lopsided to get Leif Davis the fullback forward, and the players are kind of used to moving across into that. We wonder whether we might get 3 in central midfield, but we've invested such money in Amari Hutchinson in the 10 position. I wonder whether he'd be loath to do that. But I'm confident if we go down, it won't be for the want of Kieran McKenna thinking about it and trying to adapt.
Yeah, one player that always catches my eye is Hutchinson. So talk to me a little bit about him. You must have been really pleased that you sort of got him in the Premier League as well, because again, like when we got promoted, we sort of didn't keep sort of like Tammy Abraham. So how pleased were you that he's still there?
Oh, I mean, Abraham is such a good example, and Forest were the same, that often teams get promoted, and to even have a team as good as the team that went up after, and go figure, Axel Tuanzebe was an example of a player. Did he play? He must have played in the playoff final. Did he? I can't remember. He was certainly in the team for the semis. But You know, are you going to go away and sign Tyrone Mings, Tammy Abraham, Axel Tuan Zabian? They're all on loan. So it was important we got him. And I know I'm gooing over Kieran McKenna, but he managed him so beautifully. He had this, you know, Rolls Royce of a lone player from Chelsea. He dripped him into the season. And by the end of the season, I don't know if you saw the Sky game against Hull, where he just wrapped in two from outside the box, spanked them in with his left foot. He scored the decisive goal then against Huddersfield to take us up. And yeah, he needed to be signed. To your point about Tammy Abraham, where you're like, okay, the team that's in the Premier League is not as good as the one that was in the Championship without him.
Yeah. So thoughts on Villa then? What have you made of Villa in recent seasons?
I love it. Yeah. And look, I know Villa are a bit of a unicorn in terms of shouldn't have ever been in the Championship, you know. So Villa kind of have a head start when they get promoted because they're a bigger club, you know, like a Leeds or a Nottingham Forest, where you're like, really, the level is Premier League. But what Villa have done that everybody kind of loves, and I know there's money behind it with NSWE, but everybody wants to see somebody go through and break the orthodoxy of the Big Six. There are 92 clubs, and what's 92 minus 6? 86 of the fan bases would like to see that kind of, not necessarily broken up, because clubs like Arsenal and Manchester United deserve, after decades of, you know, being huge clubs, they deserve to be up there. But to see Villa go through and to acknowledge that if you have a superstar England player, that you can flog him and then build more stars and invest all of that money in 3 or 4 players and build an Ollie Watkins and develop John McGinn that you've had through the Championship. What was John McGinn, like £2 million or something like that? And he can become a Premier League player. And then, you know, you're building in your keeper who then goes and wins the World Cup, and you know, young players come through, and Rodgers is identified and brought in. And I love Stevie Gerrard. I loved him as a player, but then they were ruthless as well to take out a very high stature figure in English football as a player and replace him with just a really damn good manager who's, well, you joke. Now Klopp has gone. Who else has done more? There's Guardiola there, but who else has done more in European football? So I love it. I always thought it didn't quite sit right, the club being in the Championship, but I love what they've done in the Premier League, and I would like to see the top 4 and the top 6 be more malleable and changeable with respect to what some of these amazing super clubs have done over the decades.
Yeah, some great words there. So let's switch it to our game then. I don't know what to expect from it, because I think, you know, how we generally play, we want to rock up, control the game, control possession. There's been a few moments in the last couple of games where we've been done on transition, which, you know, I imagine you've got a threat. I think one of your goals you scored against Fulham, you were sort of sat back a bit, and, you know, Delap sort of, you know, you broke and Delap scored. So that sort of, worries me a little bit. And I think Villa in the past have always been a little bit of a charity. Like, oh, if you need a win, play Villa and then you'll win. Or if someone's not got a goal, then they always score against Villa. So you are winless so far. How do you think the game's going to pan out?
So it's fairly obvious to say that if Villa play well and Ipswich play well, that Villa will win. We have to have enough humility to accept that Villa have more Premier League tenure. The manager has, you know, more experience and chops, and you have better players and more money. It's a fairly straightforward equation, but it's football, and sometimes things can happen. For Ipswich to win without a red card or Villa playing absolutely awfully and, you know, handing it to, it's probably what you said, is Ipswich inviting them on a little bit, and hopefully a break down the left and Davis can do something, or getting Hutchinson 1v1 or Delap on the transition, as you say. The other thing that can work, and I know the Villa players are not going to be scared to go to Portman Road, but it's early in the season, and in the Fulham game, the crowd were really up and on top and really noisy. And that means you can take the lead in the first 20 minutes. And if I'm right, Villa have been behind in games a fair few times, haven't they? 2-0 down at Everton and one down against Wolves as well. West Ham, were they behind at West Ham, or no? They drew level West Ham, didn't they? But you can score against Villa, so that's something. But I think the only way Ipswich can get anything is to noisy stadium, leverage the first 20 minutes, hope Villa are not, in Champions League form, and hope they're a bit knackered because they've played a hell of a lot more games than Ipswich have, and maybe that evens it up. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, is it enjoyable watching Ipswich in the Premier League though? Do you now you're in there? It was a bit like Luton. We did these episodes of Luton fans, and it's like the conference to Premier League, and then when you're in the Premier League, it's like, oh shit, like we got to try and win games now, and sometimes it's not as enjoyable. So, are you enjoying it, sort of watching Ipswich?
Well, it's what you make of it, isn't it? You chat to the Leicester and Southampton fans, and it's so depressing. They're like, oh, you got Villa and West Ham next. Well, that's another 0 points and minus. And you're like, well, come on, try and enjoy it while you're here. The good things so far, I mean, look, we're above the dotted line. The big elephant in the room is we've not won a game yet. However, I don't think it's deluded of me to say that when you're opening 2 games of Liverpool and then Man City away, it's like, well, okay, we'll start on game 3. And then in those 3 games, like you say, 3 draws, a draw against Fulham. I mean, hopefully we don't look back and say, oh, need to win home games against Fulham because, they're probably going to be in the middle of the table. I'm sorry, draw away at Brighton for a newly promoted team. You'll take that. Southampton away was the one everybody had circled, but then Southampton would have had that one circled as well. And if you can win the home game, so look, it's all right. And okay, there's going to be runs of games where you're like, okay, Newcastle, Arsenal, Chelsea, Fulham, Brighton, Man City, Liverpool we've got at one point. But by the same token, we've also got, after we play you, West Ham, Everton, Brentford, Leicester, where you think, right, can you get a win and a draw back to back? Because believe you me, at the bottom of the table, you'll know from that first season, back-to-back wins or a win and a draw, your points percentage flies up, doesn't it? So, look, I'm loving it, but I understand how fans get cabin fever if they've been down there year after year.
Yeah, cool, right. I've loved chatting to you. We've had a real good insight on everything to do with Ipswich. I'll tag your channel in the title and description as well. So Villa fans, go and check out the content. Like I say, dodge the Blues one, but the rest of the content is brilliant. So thanks for coming on, mate.
Absolute pleasure. And I did another of these. I said, good luck and go easy on us, yeah?